So good morning. Welcome to day 2 of the Montreal Climate Security Summit. We had fantastic and moving keynote speakers yesterday, and I can say that our reporter did an excellent job in summarizing some of the key insights of yesterday's discussion. From my perspective, it was a tremendous success, and a lot is also because of your participation and involvement in the discussions. And I hope certainly that today we can carry this momentum forward. I know that the program will take us deeper in foresight, intelligence, and practical cooperation, and we see these sessions as bridging some of the things that we talked about yesterday between research, policy, military planning, and decision making. But before we get there, it is my honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker this morning, Canada's Minister of National Defence, the Honourable David McGuinty. Minister McGuinty has a long-standing involvement in climate issues and consistently advocates for making climate change a priority in Canada's policy. He is also overseeing Canada's plan to significantly increase and accelerate its investments in defence, which will see the Canadian Armed Forces expand and enhance its military capabilities, strengthen Canada's relationship with the defense industry, and diversify its defense partnerships. I really can't think of a better start for today. Monsieur le Ministre, nous avons aujourd'hui plus de 250 dignitaires, experts, militaires, représentants gouvernementaux, et membres de la communauté d'intérêt venus des 4 coins de l'OTAN et même d'ailleurs qui sont réunis aujourd'hui à Montréal pour discuter des enjeux reliés au changement climatique et à la sécurité. Je sais que vous auriez aimé être présent avec nous en personne aujourd'hui pour rencontrer nos invités et les membres du Centre d'excellence pour les changements climatiques et la sécurité. Je vous remercie au nom de tous de nous accorder un peu de votre temps dans un horaire chargé afin de discuter avec nous de ces enjeux importants. Minister McGuinty, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much. Bonjour, good morning everyone. Permettez-moi de commencer en remerciant le Centre d'excellence OTAN pour le changement climatique et la sécurité de nous accueillir ici à Montréal et de m'inviter à prendre la parole. Merci aussi à CDAI d'avoir co-dirigé ce merveilleux événement. As you've heard, I'm so sorry to not be able to join you in person, but it is a great privilege to be able to address you virtually this morning. The work that you do, your research and your leadership in mitigating the defense and security impact on climate change has never been more important. I am just shy of 6 months as Canada's Minister of National Defence, just under a year serving as a cabinet minister, and just over 21 years serving as a member of Parliament. But before all of that, I spent years working on sustainability and climate change around the world, and previously served as President of Canada's National Roundtable on the Economy and the Environment. So in a sense, today is an intersection of the last 40 years of my life, where national meets natural security. As Minister of National Defence, I know it is critical that we deter the effects of climate change to support CAF operational readiness, community needs, and by extension, our national security. This can save lives and deter an adversary who wishes to harm us. When it comes to nature and the systems that sustain us, our wetlands, our waterways, pollination, everyone in the room knows there is no substitute. Our security and our prosperity are fully dependent on a healthy and functioning environment. Think of it as a 3-legged stool that must be kept in balance. And that balance lately is getting harder to achieve. Our international system based on shared rules and norms is under strain. War rages in Ukraine, instability persists throughout the Middle East, and tensions are simmering in the Indo-Pacific. And our adversaries are active across a multitude of domains: cyber, space, quantum, artificial intelligence, and the information space. Chaque journée, on rapporte de nouvelles incursions russes dans l'espace aérien de l'OTAN et mise à l'essai de nos approches. Par ailleurs, la Chine affiche des comportements de plus en plus agressifs envers ses voisins, de même qu'envers d'autres pays qui ont une présence dans l'Indo-Pacifique, y compris le Canada. Amplifying all of these challenges right now is climate change, a threat multiplier that's driving insecurity across the globe. Against this backdrop, Canada and its allies need to ensure our militaries are resilient and ready. This means future-proofing our military by adapting to climate change and mitigating its impacts on our operations. It also means working to ensure our actions don't make it worse. The changing climate has profound implications for national defense and the Canadian Armed Forces. It poses a threat to all Canadians, especially Indigenous and Northern communities, and for our allies. It directly affects how our countries train, equip, deploy, and operate, and nowhere is that clearer than in energy. Fuels and energy are the lifeblood of any military. Without secure supply chains at risk from climate disruption, fleets cannot move, bases cannot function, and operations cannot be sustained. That's why climate resilience isn't just environmental policy. It's operational policy. It's force readiness. And it's national security strategy too. At National Defense, we've already begun to integrate climate risk into our planning and operations. In 2024, we completed a climate change vulnerability assessment across our real property footprint. The results were sobering. 64% of our assets are at a high climate risk, especially in our coastal and northern regions. That's why we're strengthening energy resilience in our bases and in our infrastructure, ensuring that new construction accounts for sea level rise, flooding, and permafrost thaw. La Défense nationale est le plus grand émetteur fédéral de gaz à effet de serre. Et nous reconnaissons que la réalisation de nos objectifs sera cruciale pour que notre gouvernement atteigne la neutralité carbone d'ici 2050. À ce jour, nous avons déjà réduit nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 38% depuis 2005. Le MDN met en place des mesures de réduction des émissions dans son portefeuille immobilier. Pour ce faire, nous avons recours à des contrats de performance énergétique, à l'achat d'énergie propre, à la modernisation des installations de chauffage, à la mise hors service d'anciens bâtiments et à l'amélioration de notre approche en matière de gestion de l'énergie. For nearly 2 decades, we've been working on research into alternative fuels. Today, we are pursuing low-carbon fuels that meet military requirements, fuels that will help secure our military fuel supply chain, strengthen interoperability with our allies, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our primary military fleets. For example, the Royal Canadian Air Force has a net zero plan for its air platforms, and sustainable aviation fuel is at the heart of that plan. Until then, we are preparing our fleets for the day when sustainable fuels will become the norm, and we will get there. And as the framework nation for the NATO Climate Change and Security Centre of Excellence, Canada is proudly hosting a key venue right here in Montreal for allies and partners to share expertise, develop best practices, and strengthen our ability to confront the security impacts of climate change. All this work shows that we are indeed capable of adapting and mitigating, that we can future-proof ourselves as strategically as possible. But adaptation and mitigation alone are simply not enough. If we stop here, we are only treating the symptoms. To truly safeguard Canada's future, all our futures, it's time to stop a fundamental fiction. The fiction that the planet's carrying capacity is unlimited. The fiction that we are not seeing stressors, or that species aren't being depleted and rendered extinct, that we're not compromising the planet's ability to restore itself. All of these things are true. Because when it comes to nature, there is no substitute. Natural capital provides essential services: clean air, fresh water, fertile soils, flood control, climate regulation, pollination, without which our life on this planet is impossible. This natural capital also provides valuable products, medicines like penicillin and codeine, and technologies inspired by the natural world like Velcro from field burrs and aircraft from bird flight. By not protecting this critical wealth of natural capacity and the potential it promises, we run the risk of degrading or depleting altogether solutions to our defense and medical challenges and our engineering challenges of the future. We cannot manage and sustain this critical resource, nature, if we don't know how to measure it, or even know how much of it we actually have. We have a geological survey in Canada, for example, but we have no biological survey. There are some encouraging developments. For example, Canada's Water Agency is now creating a brand new national water security strategy. Pourtant, ici au Canada, nous ne disposons toujours pas d'un sondage national ou d'une façon de mesurer notre capital naturel. Here are some questions for you. What is pollination worth to food sovereignty? What is watershed integrity worth to clean water? If we don't answer these questions, we leave blind spots in our security planning. And that is why the work we do here to integrate climate, economy, and security must also integrate the environment. In defense, innovation has always been about staying one step ahead of our adversaries. We all get that. Today, that increasingly means drawing lessons from the oldest and wisest systems of all, nature's own designs. Harnessing nature's solutions is not just science, it's strategy. It's how we keep our forces interoperable, resilient, and effective in the future fight. You know, bioprospecting and biomimicry aren't just fancy buzzwords. These are the next level of strategic advantage. And nations that preserve their biodiversity and draw from their design, will have decisive options. We don't have to look very far to see that artificial intelligence is accelerating this process. It's allowing us to design new materials and systems at speeds we never imagined. Think of wildfire suppression technology using satellites, artificial intelligence, and a fleet of highly specialized drones. We are already deploying some nature-based innovations in the form of scalable, dual-use infrastructure with natural or engineered features. Everything from wetlands to reefs and barrier beaches that mimic ecological processes designed to reduce the risk of coastal flooding and erosion, while supporting biodiversity and local communities. In fact, much of our economic activity is already financed by what I call the DNA Bank of Nature. That's 500 million years of evolution on deposit. But you can't manage what you don't measure. Nulle part l'enjeu n'est-il plus évident que dans notre Arctique. La souveraineté et la sécurité du Canada dans cette région sont non négociables. Et pourtant, elles font l'objet d'une menace grandissante. An Arctic warming at 4 times the global average means more access and more interest from competitors and adversaries alike. That has significant security and sovereignty implications for Canada. But defending the Arctic mustn't come at the expense of the very environment we're actually trying to protect. Our Arctic ecosystems are fragile. Sea ice is melting, making the North more navigable and more vulnerable to intrusion. Permafrost is thawing, threatening communities and critical infrastructure as we seek to build more. Ocean coastline is exposed for longer and eroding faster, placing at risk communities, cultural heritage and wildlife habitats. Si nous traitons l'Arctique comme une ressource jetable, nous risquons de compromettre les fondements mêmes de la souveraineté canadienne. Cette souveraineté repose sur le renforcement des partenariats et une gestion efficace avec les gouvernements territoriaux et municipaux, les communautés et organisations autochtones et nordiques, ainsi qu'avec d'autres partenaires et parties prenantes. That's why we need to think of this country's natural capital and the planet's natural capital like we do a retirement pension. We want to live off the interest and sustain the capital, not deplete it. We need to balance development, national security, and ecological integrity. Have strength through sustainability. Protect nature as a form of deterrence. In military strategy, deterrence is about preventing harm before it happens. We also all get that. We build credible defenses not because we want to use them, but to avoid the devastating costs of conflict. The same principle must apply to climate security. Protecting and reinvesting in nature is a form of deterrence. Where natural ecosystems are under strain, displacement and conflict are inevitable. Water scarcity is already wreaking havoc along the Yellow River in China, Asia's second longest river, and it's driving tensions between Egypt and Ethiopia along the Blue Nile. Climate disasters alone displaced some 800,000 people in 2023, and some experts now predict up to 1.2 billion so-called climate refugees by 2050, those displaced by climate change and natural disasters. In 2023, Canada saw 192,000 people internally displaced due to climate disasters like wildfires. This is the highest ever number ever recorded. Cela met à rude épreuve la capacité opérationnelle de la Force armée canadienne, qui est de plus en plus sollicitée pour intervenir en cas de catastrophe naturelle en tant que force de dernier recours. Bien sûr, nous avons la chance de disposer des ressources nécessaires pour réagir, mettre la population en sécurité et protéger les infrastructures essentielles. Ce n'est pas le cas partout dans le monde. Disaster and ecological collapse fuel instability as surely as an aggressor crossing a border. That's why I believe measuring our natural capital, protecting and reinvesting in our natural systems is also about preventing loss of life on a massive scale. This isn't theoretical or abstract for me. In the 1980s, I was stationed for 2 years with the United Nations in Côte d'Ivoire. And in my work in the nearby Sahel region, I got to see the effects of desertification and soil collapse firsthand. In hindsight, one can see how thousands of young men with no hope for a better future might be drawn into the ranks of extremist groups that provide money, camaraderie, and purpose. Today we have groups like Boko Haram terrorizing communities in northern Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger, and Chad. In this conflict zone alone, 60,000 people have already paid with their lives. This lesson is clear. If we don't slow or reverse the effects of climate change, the bill will be paid in ever-increasing human suffering and insecurity. My friends, in the defense and security domain, we invest in preparedness because it saves lives. We build credible deterrence because prevention is always less costly than conflict. I believe the same logic must apply to climate and nature. Investing and restoring in our ecosystems and natural capital is strategic preparedness. It is national defense, and it is natural security. In the end, something is only worth defending if we can ensure there will always be something left to defend. So I'll say it again. We can replace equipment. We can rebuild infrastructure. We can resupply our forces dealing with the next climate disaster. We can do all those things. But we can't replace nature. We can't replace functioning ecosystems and services. There is no substitute. Our national and our natural security are inextricably linked. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Merci beaucoup. Je vous souhaite une belle et bonne conférence. Thank you.